For decades, the financial world has been obsessed with Silicon Valley. We cheered when Apple hit $1 trillion. We dissected every cent on the balance sheets of Amazon and Microsoft. But while the world was staring at tech, a sleeping giant was operating in the shadows of the Middle Eastern sands. A company that, for nearly 40 years, didn't open its books to the public as a listed company. No one outside the inner circle could say for sure how much it made, what it was worth, or just how deep the reserves went that kept the planet running. It became the black box of the global economy. Then, the unthinkable happened. When this company finally had to show its numbers to the market during its IPO process, the financial world came to a standstill. In 2018, it reported a net profit of $111 billion. And yes, that was more than Apple, Alphabet, the owner of Google, and ExxonMobil combined had made that same year. Its name is Saudi Aramco. And no, it isn't just an oil company. It is the fiscal engine of a kingdom, a pillar of global energy prices, and a player so strategic that when it decides to cut supply, the ripples are felt from the price of gas in your city to inflation rates across the ocean. Today, we're going to tell the full story of Aramco, from a bet in the middle of the desert that seemed destined to fail, to a colossus that touched the $2 trillion mark in market value and became the largest IPO in history. But first, subscribe to the channel to help me out, leave a like on the video, and if you're new here, welcome to Money and Magnates. To understand the magnitude of Aramco today, you have to understand the hole it climbed out of. Today, Saudi Arabia is a synonym for luxury, but less than a century ago, it was a harsh, hostile place, economically far more fragile than the image we have in our heads. A territory where temperatures can top 120 degrees at their peak, where water is life, and where any external crisis turned into immediate famine without a safety net. For a long time, much of the economy in the Gulf and coastal regions revolved around an activity that sounds like a legend today: natural pearl diving. For centuries, men would dive without oxygen, weights tied to their bodies, descending into the blue of the Persian Gulf to pull a living from the seabed. Gulf pearls were coveted the world over. They became jewelry for European courts, symbols of status, the kind of heirloom that spanned generations. But in the late 1920s and throughout the 1930s, a silent cataclysm hit. Japan popularized the cultured pearl, and, combined with the global crises of the era, the market was flooded with cheaper, standardized pearls. Demand for natural pearls plummeted, and when a region's primary source of income evaporates, there is no poetry. There's only a void that turns into desperation. It was in this setting that a warrior named Abdulaziz ibn Saud was trying to build a nation. Ibn Saud spent decades unifying tribes, negotiating alliances, and winning wars to stitch together what seemed impossible. In 1932, he officially founded the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. But founding a country on paper is one thing. Keeping it standing is another. Revenue came largely from fees tied to pilgrimages to Mecca, and the Great Depression in 1929 crushed the flow of people, crushed trade, and cut off the financial oxygen. Historical accounts suggest that, at certain points, the government's reserves were so thin and unstable they seemed to vanish overnight. The king didn't have enough money for everything he needed: to pay for loyalty, maintain troops, import food, and keep the country unified. He was backed against a wall. He needed a miracle. At the time, the Middle East was the British Empire's favorite chessboard. The British already had enormous influence in the region and a strong history with oil in places like Persia, modern-day Iran, and Iraq. But when they looked at Saudi Arabia, many experts saw a promiseless desert. Some went further and dismissed the idea of oil there as a fantasy. There's even a famous anecdote of a geologist swearing he'd drink every drop if there were oil there. Whether it happened exactly like that or not, the phrase became a symbol of the era's climate: disbelief and arrogance. That's when an unlikely character enters: Harry St. John Philby, a Brit who became an advisor to the Saudi court and argued that the kingdom shouldn't tie its fate to British colonial control. The logic he sold was simple and dangerous: negotiate with the Americans. They are traders, they bring money and technology, and they are too far away to rule you with a boot on your neck. The king listened. Philby opened the door for Standard Oil of California, or SoCal. In May 1933, the deal was signed in Jeddah, a document that, in retrospect, looks like a scene from a movie, a massive concession spanning decades in exchange for an initial payment that, by today's standards, looks like pocket change, somewhere around 35,000 British pounds, often described as being paid in gold, along with other terms that would evolve over time. Imagine that, a handful of gold gold, counted out as if it were the month's salvation, and on the other side, the right to look for energy in the middle of nowhere. Signing the paper was easy. Finding the oil was a nightmare. In late 1933, the first American geologists arrived near Damam in the eastern province. The culture shock was real. Brutal heat, rationed water, sandstorms that felt like sandpaper on your face, no comfort, no infrastructure. They started drilling. Well, number 1, dry. Well, number 2, mechanical problems, salt water, frustration, and the years passed like a sentence. 1934, 1935, 1936, massive investment, little evidence, and that cruel feeling that Saudi Arabia was, in fact, just dessert. They reached well number 6, nothing commercially viable, just bitumen, broken hopes, and a board of directors far away thinking, enough. At some point, the natural impulse of capitalism kicked in, cut the losses. The order was simple: shut down operations, close the camp, come home. The history of Aramco and the modern world would have died right there if not for the stubbornness of one man, Max Steinecke. Steinecke was the chief geologist on site, the dangerous kind of stubborn, the annoying kind of intuitive. He believed there was oil, but at a depth no one had dared to reach. He fought for one more try. He asked for one last chance. He insisted on well number 7, but this time with a decision that seemed like madness, to drill deeper than anyone thought reasonable. It was the final bet. If it failed, it was over. The desert would win. They drilled day and night. January 1938 passed. February passed. And on March 3rd, 1938, the drill reached about 1,240 meters. And then the desert answered. It wasn't a trickle. It wasn't a maybe. It was a violent gusher, a pressure that turned into panic and euphoria all at once. Within days, well number 7 was producing thousands of barrels. Steinecke sent the message that changed everything. We found it. They hadn't just found a well. They had found the way. A decade later came the monstrous confirmation of what that meant. In 1948, the Gower Field was discovered, the largest conventional oil field ever known on the planet. From that point on, it wasn't about, is there oil? It was about, how much of the world will revolve around it? The discovery was too big for one company to handle alone. They needed capital. They needed markets. They needed muscle. Other American giants entered the picture, and the structure transformed until it became Aramco, the Arabian-American Oil Company. The company literally redesigned the space around it. They built Dhahran, created infrastructure, and raised a company town that looked like a slice of America, planted in the Middle East. Inside the walls, a high standard of living, recreation, organization. Outside, a country still adjusting, still unequal, still bound by rigid laws and customs, but now with a source of money that was starting to change the game. In 1945, the relationship between these two worlds was sealed in a meeting that looks like a movie scene but is well documented. President Franklin D. Roosevelt met King Abdulaziz aboard the USS Quincy in the Great Bitter Lake of the Suez Canal. Two sick, exhausted men representing giant machines, a rising empire and a newly founded kingdom that held beneath its sands the energy heart of the century. A formal contract in the way we imagine it, with seals and signatures, wasn't signed there. But the meeting became a symbol of the alignment that grew afterward: security and strategic partnership in exchange for stability and access to a vital flow of oil. But the world changes. In the 1960s, Arab nationalism gained momentum. The idea that oil should belong to the Arabs exploded in speeches, movements, and political pressure. Saudi Arabia, however, didn't want a revolution-style takeover. They wanted a transition through negotiation. That's when Ahmed Zaki Yamani appeared, the oil minister, Harvard-educated, a man who understood how the West thought. Yamani advocated the strategy of participate first, control later. No confiscating overnight. The path would be gradual. Buy a stake, increase influence, take the helm. But sometimes history forces an acceleration. The Yom Kippur War. In response to U.S. military support for Israel, Arab exporting countries launched an oil embargo, and the world felt it in a way it will never forget. The price of a barrel skyrocketed, doubling and then nearly quadrupling, and the West panicked. Gas lines, inflation, recession, social chaos. It was the moment everyone understood a simple truth. You can have shares on paper, but whoever controls the tap makes makes the rules. From then on, the transfer of power became inevitable. Throughout the 1970s, the Saudi government increased its stake, a quarter, then a majority, until 1980, when it bought 100% of the company. The Arabian American Oil Company was no longer American-controlled. The name evolved, and later, the company would be formally restructured as Saudi Aramco. Oil became the lungs of the state. Aramco became the kingdom's cash cow. The fiscal dependence on oil began to dominate Saudi accounts, with the country financing development, its infrastructure, services, and massive ambitions with money that ultimately came from one single place. Yet, it remained a hard-to-see company for those on the outside, until the mid-2010s, when internal policy shifted gears. In 2016, with the rise of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the kingdom announced a new ambition: diversify the economy, build mega projects, and create new sources of wealth. And that requires money on an absurd scale, not millions, trillions. The idea that once seemed like heresy became the strategy: open a slice of Aramco to the market. When the documents started coming out, first with the International Bond Prospectus and later with the IPO process, the world saw the true size of the monster. In 2018, the disclosed net profit was $111 billion. What was a secret became a headline. And then came the second shock: the cost advantage. While many shale oil projects in the U.S. need prices in the $40 to $50 range per barrel to stay upright and cover their costs, Aramco operates with an extraction cost that, on average, sits at just a few dollars per barrel equivalent. It's a difference in kind, not just degree. It's like comparing a bicycle going up a mountain to an electric train on a straight track. In December 2019, Aramco finally hit the Saudi stock exchange. The pricing valued the company at around $1.7 trillion, short of the $2 trillion dream some wanted, but still a number so large it sounds fake when you say it out loud. In the early moments of trading, it did touch that symbolic $2 trillion valuation, while also securing the largest IPO ever recorded. Aramco's story is the story of the 20th century. It begins with poverty and ends with excess. It connects kings and presidents. It moves inflation, moves the cost of living, and moves energy policy. It takes a weak hand, desert, isolation, lack of money, and transforms it into one of the most powerful corporate structures to ever exist. But the giant now faces its toughest enemy: time. The world is trying, in fits and starts, to reduce its dependence on the product Aramco sells. The energy transition isn't just a competitor, it is an existential threat, and Aramco knows it. That's why today it is investing heavily in carbon capture, new industrial chains, chemicals, gas, and bets that try to push the kingdom beyond crude oil. They don't want to be remembered as the company of the last drop. They want to be the bridge to the next era. Whether Aramco will succeed in crossing into a world trying to leave carbon behind, no one knows. But if there's one thing history teaches, it's the same lesson the desert has repeated for centuries: never underestimate those who learn to survive where everything conspires against you.